Your value only becomes visible to people when you no longer try to justify it. There's a strange irony in that, isn't there? The very instant you cease defending your choices, your silence resonates more profoundly than any argument you could ever construct. This is because justification isn't a sign of strength. It's a plea in disguise. Each time you feel the need to explain your actions, you are implicitly saying, "Please validate my existence." This is the point where, as Machiavelli would have pointed out, the battle is already lost. True power doesn't plead for understanding. It commands observation. We are conditioned in a society that is fixated on explanations. If someone dislikes you, your instinct is to show them where their judgment is flawed. When you make a decision that goes against the grain, you feel compelled to prove its rationality. Yet, the reality is that the more you justify, the more you empower others to pass judgment upon you. You are essentially offering them your own authority, inviting them to rule on the validity of your life's choices. Machiavelli would have found this amusing because the moment you start seeking external validation, you abdicate the throne of your own mind. He grasped a concept that eludes most. Strategic silence can be far more potent than eloquent reasoning. In the arenas of politics, business, and personal life, individuals who are too quick to justify often reveal too much. Justification is a window into your insecurities. It signals to others where you lack confidence, what your fears are, and which of their opinions can be used to manipulate you. Picture two leaders. The first explains every single decision, every motivation, and every strategic move. The second is a person of few words, allowing their actions to be their primary statement, never stooping to explain. Who projects more control? Who appears more formidable? The second leader, without fail. There is a compelling aura around a person who feels no compulsion to explain themselves. Their mystique becomes a source of authority, and their quietude imbues their words with a perceived weight. You could argue that Machiavelli's real strength wasn't just his strategic cunning, but his masterful restraint, the power to say less while maneuvering people with the precision of a chess master. When your reasoning is unknown, people tend to fill the void with their own anxieties. And fear, when managed correctly, is a formidable tool of influence. Let's apply this to your own life. You decide to embark on something new, change careers, cut ties with toxic individuals, or follow a path that others find incomprehensible. The urge to justify your actions is immediate and powerful. You might say things like, "I need to prioritize my own well-being," or "That relationship was unhealthy for me." You try to cushion the blow, to make your decisions seem polite, rational, and easy for others to accept. What you fail to see is that every explanation you offer dilutes the strength of your decision in their perception. It transforms your choice into a point of negotiation. By justifying, you provide an opening for others to debate your logic, to question your motives, and to slowly erode your conviction. However, when you act without explanation, there is nothing for them to challenge. Your decision is unassailable, like a stone monument. They may not approve, but they cannot argue against it. Machiavelli understood that control is often achieved, not by persuading others, but by stripping them of their ability to contend with you. Here lies the true irony. Those who feel the greatest need to justify themselves are often the ones with the most honorable intentions. They strive for fairness, transparency, and understanding, but the dynamics of power do not reward fairness. They reward perception, and perception is unforgiving. It is unconcerned with the goodness of your heart. It is only concerned with how resolute you appear. When you explain, you project uncertainty. When you remain silent, you project confidence, even if you don't feel it. This is the core of a Machiavellian presence. Never reveal that you require approval. The moment you do, your adversaries won't have to lift a finger to defeat you. They will simply watch as your own words become your undoing. Justification is akin to opening your armor to demonstrate its resilience. The moment you do, someone is bound to take a shot just to see if it holds. Consider the most powerful individuals you know. They seldom justify their boundaries. They don't elaborate on why they refuse to tolerate certain behaviors or why they chose to walk away. They simply act. Their absence delivers the message. This is power in its most unadulterated form, action that requires no commentary. And here's the paradox. The more you explain your actions, the less credible they seem. Conversely, the less you explain, the more authority is projected onto you. Machiavelli would have advised, control the narrative by refusing to engage in it. The moment you are lured into self-defense, you are no longer shaping perception. You are reacting to it. And reaction is the antithesis of strategy. A strategist operates on their own timeline, according to their own rhythm. They are never moved to action simply because someone has demanded an explanation. But why is it so difficult to break the habit of justifying yourself? It's because, on a deep level, you have been conditioned to associate explanation with virtue. From a young age, you were taught that being understood is the same as being accepted. You are praised for being reasonable. Consequently, you learn to narrate every decision, hoping for the world's approval. But Machiavelli would caution you, approval is a cage. The craving for it can turn a monarch into a servant. When you justify, you become emotionally beholden to the opinions of others. You begin to tailor your words, your actions, and your very being to align with what they deem acceptable. Before you know it, your life has become a perpetual defense. You are no longer living. You are auditioning. This is why so many people feel depleted after social engagements. They are in a constant state of performance, playing the role of the reasonable person, haunted by the fear of being misunderstood. But when you stop justifying, a fundamental shift occurs. Initially, it will feel alien. The silence will weigh on you, a palpable tension begging to be broken. You will be tempted to explain simply to alleviate the discomfort. But if you can withstand that initial impulse, that is when your power truly begins to crystallize. The silence that once felt oppressive will begin to work to your advantage. People will start to question themselves instead of questioning you. Why didn't they respond? Did I overstep? Perhaps they don't require my approval at all. That single thought, the realization that you are not dependent on them, is what unsettles people the most. This is the art that Machiavelli mastered, the ability to weaponize absence, the power of saying nothing and doing little, yet compelling people to search for your meaning. It creates a kind of emotional gravity. The less you justify, the more others are drawn into the orbit of your mystique. They begin to discuss you amongst themselves, attempting to decipher your motives, trying to fill the void your silence has created. And every moment they spend analyzing you is a moment they are placing you at the center of their universe. When every fiber of your being screams for you to justify yourself, remember that you owe no one a dissertation for living your truth. Explanations might offer a fleeting sense of relief from anxiety, but in the long run, they invariably diminish your power. Machiavelli would assert that genuine stability doesn't stem from being liked. It stems from being consistent. People may misinterpret you for a time, but ultimately, your results will provide all the explanation that is needed. And when that day arrives, all the words you once yearned to say will feel utterly superfluous. So the next time someone questions your decisions, put yourself to the test. Don't explain. Offer a simple smile. Let them wonder. Let them construct their own narratives. Because the moment they start guessing, you have already reclaimed control. And as Machiavelli expressed in his own way, never interrupt an adversary when they are making assumptions about you. Their curiosity becomes your concealment. Their confusion becomes your defense. In time, you will notice a remarkable change. The less you justify, the less turmoil you invite into your life. People who thrive on conflict will drift away because they can no longer draw energy from you. You will cease to replay conversations in your mind, endlessly trying to formulate the perfect explanation. Your sense of peace will no longer be contingent on whether someone else gets it. And gradually, everything that is meant for you will begin to fall into place because you have stopped contorting yourself to fit what is not. That is when life begins to organize itself quietly, gracefully, without the noise of debate. Because when you stop justifying yourself, you cease to live as a reaction and begin to live as a force. You will start to comprehend the immense amount of energy you have been squandering. The day you finally stop explaining yourself is like suddenly becoming aware of how deafening the background noise has always been. Every conversation you once replayed, every argument you sought to win, every moment you felt misunderstood, all of it will vanish. Because once you stop defending yourself, you begin to see that most people were never listening to understand you in the first place. They were listening to validate their own preconceptions. And that is a battle you are destined to lose, no matter how logical, polite, or sincere you attempt to be. Machiavelli would tell you this. People do not judge you based on the truth. They judge you based on their own utility. If your explanation offers them no benefit, they will dismiss it. If your silence makes them uneasy, they will respect it. It is a harsh dynamic, but it is the reality. This is why powerful individuals do not squander their time on explanations. They understand that perception is not shaped by words, but by the command of emotion. The less you try to persuade someone, the more they begin to persuade themselves. When you justify yourself, you grant others the authority to determine which version of you is permissible. You are, in essence, telling them, "Here, allow me to reshape myself to fit your comprehension." But when you stop, you seize that power back. You allow people to misunderstand you, to mislabel you, even to resent you, and you remain unflinching. That is when you truly begin to operate on a different plane, because what shatters most people is not rejection, but the terror of being misunderstood. Yet Machiavelli knew that this very fear is what binds leaders to a state of weakness. The need to be understood is fundamentally a need to belong, and those who value belonging over influence will forever be at the mercy of others. You will also start to recognize patterns. The individuals who demand explanations are often the ones who have already made up their minds. They seek your words only to contort them into confirmation of what they already believe. So Machiavelli's solution, while stark, was effective. Never defend yourself to those who question your motives, only to those who question your results. Because when your results speak for themselves, your silence becomes your most compelling argument. And that is a reality that no one can debate. Think about this in the context of relationships. The moment you begin to defend your intentions, "I didn't mean it that way. You misunderstood me. I was just trying to help," you shift from a position of equality to one of subordination. You have tacitly accepted their emotional framework. But when you cease to explain, when you simply state, "You are entitled to your perspective," it alters the entire dynamic. Suddenly, they are the ones who feel the disequilibrium. You are calm, composed, and untouchable. You are not vying for approval. You are standing firmly within it. And that composure unnerves people far more than any impassioned defense ever could. This is because silence is not a void in communication. It is a form of dominance. It compels others to fill the space. And what they choose to fill it with often says more about them than it does about you. When you refuse to justify, you become a mirror. People project their own insecurities, their assumptions, and their latent fears onto your stillness. And while they are occupied with analyzing you, you remain free, unmoved, focused, and unexposed. That is a psychological advantage. It is not an easy path, however. The world teaches you that silence is tantamount to guilt, that if you don't explain yourself, you must have something to hide. But this belief is merely a tool of control, because silence is a threat to the insecure. It renders them powerless to interpret. That is why they press for explanations, not to understand you, but to wrest back control of the narrative. The moment you cease to provide it, you reveal their desperation to be right. Machiavelli would say, "The wise person uses misunderstanding as camouflage." Let people misjudge your motives. It keeps them guessing. The objective is not to be liked. It is to be unreadable. Because when people cannot define you, they cannot confine you. And in that ambiguity, they will either respect you or expose their own insecurity by trying to bring you down. In either scenario, you emerge victorious. This transformation does not occur instantly. At first, your silence will feel like a defeat. You will think, if I could just explain it, they would finally understand. But then you will recall all the times you did just that, and nothing changed. The more you explained, the less they seemed to hear. The more transparent you were, the more they questioned you. That is when you realize that explaining yourself does not foster peace. It fosters dependency. You begin to seek closure from people who are never in a position to grant it. And once you grasp that, justification starts to feel like a cheap commodity. You will begin to prioritize your peace over your point. You will observe arguments unfolding before you and think. Not every truth requires an audience. This is the level of mastery that Machiavelli aspired to the discipline to walk away. Not out of defeat, but because the conflict itself is beneath your station. This does not mean you become cold or dismissive. It means you become strategic. You choose your moments to speak, not because you owe someone clarity, but because silence has ceased to serve your objective. You explain only when it amplifies your influence, never when it is merely to defend your ego. This is how power and peace can coexist, because silence is not about withholding. It is about mastering timing, and it is fascinating to observe how the world recalibrates itself once you adopt this practice. People who once challenged you will begin to reconsider their tone. Those who mistook your patience for weakness will be caught off guard when they realize you are no longer participating in their game. You will notice that your relationships become less complicated, your environment becomes quieter, and your path becomes clearer. Not because everyone has suddenly understood you, but because you no longer require them to. When you stop justifying yourself, you begin to move through the world as someone who knows their value is inherent. You start to act from a place of conviction rather than reaction. Every decision becomes more intentional, more anchored. You stop over-explaining your boundaries and instead enforce them with consistency. You stop saying, "I hope you understand," and start saying nothing at all, because you finally do. You understand yourself, and in that self-understanding, everything external begins to align. Not because the world has become more accommodating, but because you have stopped expending your strength trying to win its approval. You begin to notice how much clarity is born from silence, how much confidence is derived from not answering every single accusation. You realize that peace is not found in being understood. It is found in the liberation of not needing to be. That is when life begins to feel fundamentally different. You carry yourself differently. You speak differently. You no longer feel the need to rush in and fill the silence after you have established a boundary. You allow it to linger in the air, weighty and resolute. And people perceive it. They sense that something within you has shifted, that you are no longer accessible through guilt, pressure, or emotional turmoil. That is when respect quietly begins to supplant misunderstanding. Because power is not loud. It is calm. And the calmest individual in any room is the one who has already reconciled with the possibility of being misunderstood. Something extraordinary occurs once you accept that not everyone is entitled to an explanation. You cease to chase after fairness. You stop trying to correct every rumor, every distorted version of your truth. You start to realize that silence is not surrender. It is selection. You are consciously choosing where to direct your energy, and that choice alters everything. Machiavelli would have termed this the principle of controlled perception. The wise individual does not attempt to control what everyone thinks of them. They control how much access others have to their truth, because power does not originate from being known. It originates from being unpredictable. The moment everyone understands you, you have forfeited your advantage. You have handed them the blueprint for your manipulation. But when you remain calm, quiet, and unreadable, people begin to treat you with caution. They respect the enigma they cannot solve. This is not arrogance. It is self-preservation. You start to learn that most explanations are not for the purpose of clarity. They are for comfort. You explain yourself to placate the emotions of others, not your own. You do it to maintain peace, to make others feel secure with your choices. But the more you engage in this, the more you train people to anticipate it. They begin to feel entitled to your reasoning. They stop respecting your silence and start demanding your defense. And when that occurs, you become a servant to the emotional expectations of everyone but yourself. So you establish a boundary. You stop over-communicating. You stop providing a manual on how to interpret you. You stop apologizing for every decision that doesn't align with their narrative. And the moment you do, the world will begin to test you. They will say you have changed. They will label you as distant, cold, or selfish. They will accuse you of thinking you are superior, but that is not what is happening. You are simply no longer available for their emotional micromanagement. You are finally preserving your power. Machiavelli would tell you that the cost of power is misunderstanding. You cannot be a leader and be universally understood simultaneously. The two are mutually exclusive. People project their own insecurities onto figures of authority. They need to dislike what they cannot control. And so, if everyone always understands you, it is a sign that you have diluted yourself to an excessive degree. The goal is not to be relatable. It is to be respected. And respect is not earned through lengthy speeches. It is earned through patterns. When your actions consistently align with your principles, people stop asking for explanations. They begin to adapt to your silence. At first, they will push back. They will test the boundary to see if they can still draw you into their drama. But when you refuse to take the bait, when you remain steadfast, something shifts. They realize they cannot manipulate what does not react. That is when you become unshakable. You start to view life as a game of energy exchange. Every justification is a withdrawal from your reserves of strength. Every moment of silence is a deposit. The more you conserve, the more grounded you become. And the irony is that when you stop chasing people's understanding, you begin to attract their respect. Because silence communicates something that explanations never can. Certainty. There is a kind of gravity that surrounds people who no longer require external understanding. They move differently. Their presence commands a pause. They do not raise their voice. They do not engage in arguments. They simply exist with a stillness that disquiets the restless. It is not that they do not care. It is that they have ceased to perform. That stillness is power that has been refined into discipline. Think of the times you have witnessed someone attempting to discredit another person who refused to explain themselves. The silence makes the accuser appear increasingly desperate. Every verbal assault they launch seems to bounce off a wall of calm. The audience begins to notice not who is speaking, but who is not. The one who remains unflinching is the one who is ultimately believed. That is a fundamental aspect of human psychology. People trust composure over clamor, and that is why Machiavelli regarded restraint as a political instrument. He knew that a ruler who defends every criticism forfeits his mystique. He becomes ordinary, just another voice pleading his own righteousness. But a ruler who remains silent in the face of attack compels others to interpret his silence as a sign of superiority. The human mind instinctively fills in the blanks with an assumption of power. So what does this mean for you? It means that the less you justify yourself, the more space you create for others to adapt to your standards. It means that your peace ceases to be dependent on how much sense you make to others. It means you finally comprehend that not every situation necessitates clarity. Some situations necessitate closure, and closure is not always achieved through words. Sometimes it is a quiet exit, a firm boundary, or a look that communicates more than any paragraph ever could. And here is the beautiful irony. When you stop trying to make people understand you, they begin to understand you more clearly, because your consistency starts to speak more loudly than your explanations ever did. They realize you don't explain, not because you are arrogant, but because you are intentional. You are focused on action, not on argument. You are building, not convincing. And that is when everything starts to align. The right people remain, the wrong people fade away, and your path begins to clear without you having to force it. You stop feeling anxious about what others think. You stop rehearsing conversations in your mind. You stop explaining your silence. You just move. And that movement, quiet, steady, and unapologetic, creates a rhythm that life itself begins to follow. That is when everything truly falls into place. Not because the world has suddenly become fair, but because you have stopped negotiating with it. You have started acting like someone who trusts themselves enough to allow time to explain what words cannot. And that is what Machiavelli understood better than anyone. That true power is not about being right in the moment. It is about being undeniable in the end. That the day you stop justifying yourself is the day you begin to see who is genuinely listening and who was merely waiting for their turn to respond. Silence becomes the filter that exposes loyalty. People who truly respect you do not need lengthy explanations to trust your decisions. They have seen enough of your character to know that there is reasoning behind your actions. But the ones who constantly demand justification were never in pursuit of truth. They were in pursuit of control. They wanted your explanations not to understand you, but to keep you small enough to question yourself. Machiavelli would have called this the politics of perception, the invisible conflict between your self-assurance and the world's desire to challenge it. Every time you explain yourself, you are stepping onto their battlefield, fighting a war that cannot be won. Because even if you win the argument, you forfeit the aura of authority. You teach people that your boundaries and your convictions are open to negotiation. And when that happens once, they will ensure it happens again. But when you stop explaining, the entire game is reversed. Suddenly, they are at a loss for how to approach you. They cannot find any leverage. Their usual tactics, guilt, shame, accusation, fall flat against your calm silence. They will call it arrogance, but deep down, they will feel something closer to intimidation, because silence is a signal of self-ownership. And that is something most people never achieve. Asterisk. This shift does not make you hard. It makes you sovereign. You no longer run from misunderstandings. You allow them to exist. You stop wasting time chasing the approval of others and start channeling that energy into your own direction. The peace that follows is not loud or euphoric. It is clean. It is the quiet stability that comes when you finally stop explaining your intentions to people who are committed to misunderstanding them. It is the same principle Machiavelli applied in his strategies. When your enemy is unaware of your motives, they cannot anticipate your next move. They are forced to be reactive while you remain proactive. That is how an advantage is created, not through endless clarification, but through controlled ambiguity. The moment you stop over-explaining, you reclaim the element of surprise. People no longer know what you are thinking, and that uncertainty makes them cautious. It is a strange truth. You become more trusted when you stop trying to prove that you are trustworthy. You become more respected when you stop asking for respect. Because real power does not need to announce itself. It is simply felt. The less you say, the more people lean in. They start to weigh every word, every pause, every glance. And without realizing it, they begin to move to your rhythm. In time, you will see how unnecessary most explanations truly are. The friend who betrayed you does not deserve your dissertation on forgiveness. The person who left you does not need to hear the extent of their impact. The coworker who twisted your motives will never comprehend your truth, even if you were to write it out in meticulous detail. And that is the beauty of silence. It forces people to confront their own discomfort. When you stop explaining, the narrative about you bifurcates. Those who know your essence will defend you without needing a single word. Those who never cared will distort your silence into something it is not. But neither of those versions matters anymore, because your peace is no longer dependent on which one people choose to believe. You start to realize that your energy is better invested in building and in convincing. Machiavelli would say that the wise ruler focuses not on justification, but on demonstration. You do not tell people who you are. You show them over time through your results. And results render every argument obsolete. The person who said you would fail is silenced by your success. The one who questioned your loyalty vanishes when your integrity remains unwavering. Words lose all their power in the face of proof. And it is not just about power. It is about peace. Every time you explain yourself, you are revisiting a wound that could have been left to heal. You are reopening it for someone who may never value your vulnerability. But when you stop, you allow time to do the speaking. You allow distance to reveal the truth. You stop dragging the past into every conversation. You live like someone who knows that explanations are not what build trust. Consistency is at some point. You realize that silence does not equate to weakness. It equates to wisdom. You learn that calmness does not equate to indifference. It equates to clarity. And that when people truly see you, they will not need the words you once so desperately pleaded to be understood through. There is an unmistakable shift in the way you carry yourself. You stop over-explaining your ambitions. You stop defending your boundaries. You stop apologizing for your need for solitude. You stop narrating your healing process for an audience that was never listening to begin with. You stop trying to make people comfortable with your evolution. And that is when the world begins to adjust to you, rather than you adjusting to it. People who used to drain you will fall away, not because you pushed them, but because your silence ceased to feed their need for conflict. Those who remain will begin to value your quiet strength. They will start to ask questions differently. They will start to listen more carefully. And in the spaces where you once felt unseen, you will begin to feel unbothered. Because now, your peace is no longer something that others can take. It is something they can only witness. When you stop justifying yourself, everything that once felt forced begins to align naturally. The right people understand without an explanation. The right opportunities present themselves without you having to beg. The right rhythm returns to your life. Not because the world has changed, but because you have. You have stopped defending your right to exist exactly as you are. And that is what Machiavelli would call the highest form of control. Not control over others, but control over yourself. The control to remain silent in the midst of chaos, to remain certain in the face of doubt, to allow misunderstanding to pass through you without eliciting a reaction. Because the one who does not justify is the one who has already won. And in that stillness, in that refusal to explain what requires no explanation, you will realize something profound. Everything you were trying to earn by defending yourself was already yours the moment you stopped. Asterisk.